Welcome to Seasoned Conversations, where experience meets insight and life's journey reveals its deepest wisdom. I'm your host, Kenneth Braswell, and here we share authentic stories of reinvention, purpose, and fulfillment from the seasoned paths we walk. Together, we'll explore how to age boldly, live intentionally, and embrace our second act with clarity and confidence. So pull up a chair. There's always room at the table for Seasoned Conversations. Welcome to Seasoned Conversations. I'm your host, Kenneth Braswell, and we have now started this new podcast to really talk about the seasoned part of our lives. For most of us, that's 50 plus. For some of us, that's 60 plus. For some of us who are fortunate, it might even be 70 plus. For some folks who are just kind of thinking about it, they may not be there yet. It could be 40 plus. But anybody who's in that transitional part of their lives where they're beginning to think about their future more than their past, and they're thinking about, for those who are in those upper ranges, like myself, who often say to myself, and I say this out loud, and my wife has said to me, babe, stop saying that because you don't know the reality of what's going to actually happen. And I'll use the term and I'll say I have more years behind me than I have in front of me. And so for me, that's just a realistic way of looking at life. And so I'm having these conversations now, with my fellow seasoned individuals. And today I have my good friend and brother, Dr. Jeff Gardere, who has always shown up in my preseason life. And we related, and now he's here in our collective season life.
Many years together, right?
Where we're just, relating on so many different and multiple levels. And even in our short conversation today, and this was not even intentional, our conversation just seemed to center around the seasonedness of our lives.
That's right.
Right? Even
That's
talking
right.
in normal conversation. But specifically today, I want to kind of lean in on the mental and emotional health and how that allows us or doesn't allow us to manage our stress levels. Because when you get in this space, that very notion of more years behind than in front could lend a level of stress.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
When did you begin to start thinking about your transition?
I would say in my early 60s, I really started thinking about and saying exactly what you said, more years behind me than in front of me. Or as I would say, well, I'm in the last quarter of the game, because if I can get another 25 years, that will put me at an age, closer to about 95.
Gotcha.
And at that point, I'm more interested in health span versus lifespan.
Okay.
Right? I want to be healthy all the way through.
Quality of life.
Quality of life. But I started thinking about that simply because, and I don't think you're experiencing this yet, but maybe you are. I just found out, I discovered after a while that almost everywhere that I went, I was the oldest person in the room.
Yeah.
And that was it.
Mm-hmm.
That was the marker. That was the signal. That was the sign.
Mm-hmm.
When you're the oldest person in the room, almost everywhere you go,
Right.
then you start thinking about the transition.
Yeah, for me, I used to always say, because I was in the professional DJ and radio business for a large part of my life, and I used to always say, I never want to become the old guy in the club. Remember that guy?
Right. or the old guy who's single or pretending to be single,
Right.
At the bar trying to pick up women. And it's really interesting because when you get to a certain age, if you are about integrity, you don't even look at women in this, if you're heterosexual, you don't even look at women in the same way anymore. If someone is below 60 or 50, you may look at them and say, oh, that's an attractive person, but you don't linger because it makes you look like that dirty
Right.
old man.
Absolutely.
You know, it's not respectful to you. It's not respectful to the woman, simply because that person is the age
Right.
of perhaps one of your daughters.
But it's also there you go. Bam. It's a reflection of your own children.
That's right.
And
That's
so
right.
you're looking at people, and in your mind, you're saying, man, I'm old enough to be your father. Now, it really begins to hit when you say, I'm old enough to be your grandfather.
Well, I've done that too. But let me tell you, when you know you're getting older. By the way, there's nothing wrong with getting older.
Right.
We're actually loving it.
Absolutely.
Right?
Mhm.
Right? It was like that comedian with George Hamilton when he did that Dracula movie, you know, and he said, I think the title was Dracula, Dead and Loving It. So, you know, we think about the transition, and we're actually loving it. But, you know, I knew that age, that time, that crossing that particular, you know, Rubicon, if you will. I don't know if I'm using that in the right way, but we can even say jump the shark.
Right, absolutely. That's what's taking you back.
When I see beautiful young women, the only thing I think about now is, wow, my son would really like this woman, or I wish my son, you know, could meet, you know, this particular woman, or I would love to pair this woman up with one of my sons.
Absolutely.
Not with me, but with one of my sons. And that's the way I look at it.
Right. And when you think about that, I said something to a friend of mine. I was talking about my 16-year-old, which was our surprise blessing.
Yeah.
As many of us
Yeah.
get those
That's
at our
right.
ages. The blue pill does something for that we weren't prepared for. But anyway, and I deflect. But I said to someone, as it relates to my son, I said, I'm trying to raise someone's excellent husband.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Right, it wasn't about I just want him to find a beautiful
Yeah,
girl. I want
yeah,
him to.
yeah.
It was I need to prepare him to be an excellent husband.
Well, the way you do that, of course, and as you've always done, is it's not just about the advice that we give to our sons or our daughters about being, you know, excellent partners, but it's what we act in front of them. It's the behaviors that we manifest in front of them, how we talk about women and men, how we talk about relationships, how we talk about other people. These are the things that help in many ways mold our children into being good people for themselves, but who will be good people in relationships, because we know the secret.
Absolutely.
The secret is, if you want to be in a productive relationship, you've got to be respectful. That partner has to be your friend. You have to, you know, be at your best as much as you can be. And you have to truly manifest love and friendship.
Yeah.
This is what we learn when we get older, by the way.
Absolutely. That's what being seasoned is all about. I always tell people, you know, the gray in our hair and in our face
Or what I used to have as hair, yeah.
is God rewarding us for our wisdom.
Thank God
It's
we're
the
still around.
sprinkling.
There it is. That's right.
And so
That's
when
right.
people dye their hair all black and like, you're dismissing the whole point of having
That's right.
season.
That's right.
Season is about you are now coming into a flavor that is now insatiable to people.
Most medical people will tell you that where we are with aging now is not about covering it up, you know. It's not about acting an age that you're not. It's really about gracefully embracing the aging process, but in a very healthy way.
Yes.
You know, making sure that we take care of ourselves, that we're able to move, that we exercise, that we eat the right foods, you know, that we do all of the things that will allow us to have. Yes, we want that lifespan, but as I said earlier, it's about the health span.
Absolutely. Having said that, for many of us, there's a trigger or an epiphany point or a tipping point that makes us think about, whoa, I need to think about this a little differently,
Yeah.
right? For some of us, it's a health issue. right?
That's right. That wakes you up.
Right.
Smacks you in the face. You're like, wait a minute. I didn't know that could happen to me.
Right.
I've seen it happen to other people and other people who are older.
Right.
But I think it's what we talked about, right?
Mm-hmm.
That whole idea that, well, just because in your mind you're still 23 doesn't mean that physically,
Mm-hmm.
if you're in your 60s or 70s, that you're still 23.
Right.
It's good to have that youthful,
Mm-hmm.
Thinking and
Mm-hmm.
attitude.
Mm-hmm.
But that means you really better take care of yourself.
Yeah, because
when
even
you
with
get
my
that
son,
age.
who's 6'4", athlete, varsity basketball, wants to be in the league, we'll be outside sometimes. You're like, Dad, let's play a game. I'm like, I don't know if this is really going to be a game.
Right.
Because I'm not falling for the banana in the tailpipe.
Right.
Because
Right.
I don't have the time to recover from an Achilles tear.
Yeah, that's right.
Right? And so I have to be intentional about my movement. I have to slow down. I have to let him run by me if I know I can't keep up with him.
Ken, it's called being smart.
Right. Wisdom.
It's called being prudent. It's called wisdom.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Like we know, for example, do you remember when we were kids and people would be out there shoveling snow all the time back when we had snow?
Right.
Right? And, and I remember, hearing people saying to older individuals, be careful with your back, be careful with your heart.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get that age and you could still do it,
Mm-hmm.
but that voice inside your head says, maybe you should be careful. Because if you throw out your back, or God forbid have a heart attack,
Mm-hmm.
how long are you going to be incapacitated for?
Right. Right.
I'm not a coward,
Mm-hmm.
but I know at the age that I'm at right now, and I'll just tell it, by the time this comes out, I'll be 70, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to get on a motorcycle and ride a motorcycle.
Right.
Because, God forbid, there's an accident,
Mm-hmm.
even wearing my helmet, that could be the end of me.
Absolutely.
Versus if I were 25 or 30
Mhm.
and riding a motorcycle.
Mhm.
So that is part of the wisdom too, being smart
Mm-hmm.
about what you do. I think some people call it working smarter
Mm-hmm.
and not harder.
Mm-hmm.
I call it living smarter and not harder.
Absolutely. And there's nothing wrong with if you can't get up without making a noise. That's the thing that always kind of like
me, it's
every
like
time
kung
you
fu.
move, it's like you got to make a noise.
To me, it's kung fu.
Right.
Anything that helps.
Absolutely.
Ooh.
Make it sound cool. We
That's
can still
it.
be cool. Old is still cool.
That's it.
Seasoned is still cool. I'm trying to eradicate the word old out of my mind.
I
unless
like
it's an
seasoned.
inanimate
I like
object.
seasoned. I love it.
Love
actually.
seasoned. And so the other element is mental, right? When we begin to not remember things as vividly as we used to remember things.
Right.
And now we're in this space, and I don't know if it has always been this way. I just know that we have always treated mental conditions differently along our lifespan, where we're now dealing with the issues of dementia, Alzheimer's disease, and just forgetfulness being on.
We call it cognitive slowdown,
Yeah.
cognitive slippage.
Right.
It doesn't even have to be a dementia. The bottom line is, you take a 20-year-old person, put him in a classroom, and say, I want you to learn biology.
Mm.
And then you put a 75-year-old person in there, right?
Mm.
That 75-year-old person, because of their life experience, may have a better understanding and appreciation of sitting in that classroom and learning biology.
Right.
But that 20-year-old will be able to memorize the textbook.
Mm-hmm.
There's the
Yeah,
difference.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So there was a question that I asked myself that actually stimulated me writing Too Seasoned to Care. And the question was, when was the first time in your life that you cared about what someone thought about you or how you looked to the world?
Mm-hmm.
And when I was deconstructing my life to figure out what that was, what I landed on was this time that my mother and I had an argument in Brooklyn, New York. and she wanted me to go to the store to purchase something, but she gave me food stamps. And I remember her and I getting into an argument about I didn't want to go to the store using food stamps because in my mind, I did not want my friends and I did not want anybody to know that I was poor. But what I never considered was maybe it was the same reason she didn't want to go. But then I asked the second question was, who told you you were poor?
Right. Right.
If you had to wind back in your life to kind of think about an incident where you thought about how someone was going to see you, can you go back that far?
I can, but you know, I wouldn't go back to my childhood, but maybe I'd go to my 20s and 30s when I was single, you know, and actively dating, and you know what women thought of me. You know, he's short.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
He's, you know, he's not tall, dark, and handsome. You know, he's short, light, and passable, you know, as far as, you know, being in a relationship. Maybe I'll give him a little play or whatever. But, you know, when I started, you know, getting out there and I realized it wasn't about the outside. It was really about what was in here and what was in my heart. And, you know, I learned about how to talk to people, you know. I learned how to date and how to, and still, you know, I was rejected often because, you know, as that old saying, you know, I may not be the kind of man that women dream of, but to some woman, I carry the key to her heart. It's finding her, right? But now at this age, you know, and what I started feeling in my 40s or 50s, it was like, it's not about whether, you know, you're interested in me. It's whether I'm interested in you, you know, because as the years went by, the wisdom, the accomplishments, the, you know, life experiences, and even now, you know, I just don't give a rat's behind as to what anyone thinks as to how I look or act or whatever. Of course, I'm always on my best behavior, but you reach a point in your life where being the oldest person in the room, for some people, they may be embarrassed about it. For me, just as you said, being seasoned, I see it as, you know, I've earned my stripes, you know.
I also see it another way, and that is somewhat accepting your truth.
And accepting who you are. Or you know, as Frankie Beverly of Maze, you know, the late, great Frankie Beverly said, you know, there comes that time in the season when the sun goes down and you know who you are.
I had the pleasure of seeing his last performance here in Atlanta. And
what a man.
And I'm watching him on stage and I'm saying to myself, man, I remember when I used to go and see him.
Back in the days.
90s.
Oh yeah, those were great concerts.
Oh my goodness. Saw Shaka Khan. Shirley Caesar. I'm seeing all these people
but they all became seasoned. You know, Shaka Khan, I've heard her give a few interviews, and you know, I mean, it was interesting. She threw shade on some people, you know, saying, "Oh, well, you think that person's, you know, you know, a great musician? Do you know who you're standing in front of? Because she's like an amazing talent, always has been. So she knows her power. You know, Shirley Caesar, you know, knew power. Patti LaBelle, you know, they walk into a room like, you know,
what?
I'm Rick James, damn
it. Absolutely.
You know, and it's not that they're being, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? Belligerent. They know who they are. They are seasoned.
I don't know if you remember the book. I think it was entitled "Come On, People." Dr. Bill Cosby and Dr. Alvin Passant.
Together.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wrote this book called Come On People,
Mm-hmm.
where they were what people described as chastising the black community for the conditions that they thought we were in. And I remember the visceral reaction of people to them, like, how dare you say this in a book, and how dare you? And I didn't understand it then. And I went and I picked that book up probably 3 or 4 months ago, and I read halfway through it. And as I was reading it, I was saying to myself, they were speaking their truth. It wasn't an indictment on anyone. It was from their lenses, what they were seeing, they didn't approve of, and they wanted to call it out.
Mm-hmm.
You could do what you want to do with the information, but I'm going to give it to you. As I see people beginning to do that more and more, is there a responsibility to having that level of freedom? Because the ability to be liberated in that way is a level of freedom.
To be liberated in your thinking,
Yeah.
because of your experiences, because of your maturity, because of your age. I find as a therapist, right? The therapy I'm doing now is so much more different than what I did in my 30s and 40s. First of all, people come to me now because not only do they want a therapist, but they want a seasoned therapist, right? They come to me now because not only do they want a therapist, but they want someone who can give them almost paternalistic information and advice, right? I get a lot of young black males that I've worked with who see me not just as a therapist, but also as a father figure. Now, of course, as a therapist and therapeutically, you need to be careful with that, you know, for what they call transference, countertransference, feelings that may be, engendered with this person seeing you as a father figure. If they didn't like their father, they may not like you at some points either. So you have to be careful with that, or treating someone, a patient, like they're your son, and then it becomes a situation of where you may be giving too much advice and not analyzing enough. So you have to find the proper balance. But at this age, the kind of therapy that I'm doing is so far ahead and spiritual and experiential than what I did in my 30s. And that's why I think it's really important when we go out and we find our mental health clinicians and so on, not to knock the young people, because they have the energy to do very dynamic therapy. But I think what we see in our geriatric, therapists, or even, our medical practitioners, is that experience. And that can make a major, major difference. And you're doing that, with your book, with your podcast. You're giving them information that you were never able to give before. And that information you gave before on fatherhood was extremely valuable and unique. And now it's seasoned.
So part of that,
it's like my food. I used to have it bland, but now it's seasoned.
It's seasoned. And so there has been some epiphanies even in my fatherhood work, where I'm now thinking differently about the motivating factor for guys to do what they need to do, and not in a chastising, accountability way, which is, dude, taking care of your children is in essence taking care of yourself.
That's right.
Because at some point you're going to become seasoned, and the circle of life says that one day your children will become your parents.
That's right.
And what is going to be the condition of your relationship that makes your sons and your daughters want to change your diapers when they think about what you've contributed to their life? And if that doesn't matter to you, then you don't matter to yourself.
Well, that's the circle of life and the circle of giving. And that's why I always say to parents, be careful how you behave, be careful how you treat your parents, okay? Because your children are going to see that, right? So when your parents are gone and now your children are taking care of you, they're going to do what it is that you did for your parents. You know, if we're in that sandwich generation, right? So it's really important that you know, not only are you taking care of your parents, but you're taking care of yourself. Not only are you taking care of your children, just as you said, but you're taking care of yourself. You know, an earlier question you asked me, how did you know that you were seasoned in getting, you know, towards, you know, the pearly gates, right? I started noticing that my daughters were coming over and visiting me more and asking me things like, one of my oldest daughter, 32, said to me, Dad, her boyfriend was there, her fiance, and she said, Dad, I want a martini. Can you make me one? I said, sure. How do you like it? She said, you know, the way you usually make it. You mean the way I like it? You know, vodka, a little bit dirty, 3 olives, you know, a little bit dirty like me. Yeah, I'll make it for you. Her fiance stepped in and said, oh, no, don't worry. I'll make it for you. You know, the gallant thing. She said, no, I want my father to make it. And it hit me. She wants the experiences with her father because she does not know how much longer she will have her father.
Right. Mine was a little different. Similar, but different. When I began to start hearing both Nzinga and KJ in conversation say to me, yeah, I was talking to such and such, and I said to them, my dad always says blah, blah, blah. Or my dad always did it this way. And I'm waiting, whoa. I didn't know that particular thing transferred.
That's right.
And oftentimes there are things that I forgot totally about.
You're already an ancestor. You see? In their minds, you're already an ancestor, right? You're already an ancestor. Let me tell you this one. I'm getting out of the car. 2 of my sons run around the car. Now you see, you know, yeah, I'm an old guy, but I still move like I was 22 or 23.
Wow.
I work 82 hours a week. I have kids, 32, 31, 23, 21, 10 years old, 8 years old. Okay? Wow. So I'm still getting around. Okay? These guys run around, my 2 older sons, here, let's help you out of the car. I was like, bro. Then I go to grab my bag. They're like, oh no, we'll carry that for you. I was like, damn it, I am old. Season.
Right. Now, do you still insist when you come from the supermarket to carry every bag in the car and reduce
If they volunteer, I let them carry it because I tell them it helps build their character.
So the last thing, and we could talk. This thing could go.
We can go on forever.
Yeah. We'll come back and we'll continue.
I've got to tell you, I'm just so proud of you, Kenny.
Thank you.
Because the things you're a visionary, and the things that you have created in this world have helped so many people, and the fatherhood piece has helped so many people. The community things that you've done have helped so many people. And now your mission, in addition to everything else you're doing, is bringing a pride to aging and being seasoned. And we need that now more than ever. Because ableism, prejudice against older people, all of those things are very, very real.
Right.
You get a certain age and you're already discounted. Nah, we don't want you to, we ain't gonna give you this. No, we don't think you can do that job. No, that's not the look we want. We want a young person, we want an influencer. And you're saying, wait a minute.
Don't dismiss.
Don't dismiss us. Right. We are the kings and the queens. Right. We are the generals.
We got you here.
We earned where we are.
Yeah. I think
And
that,
let's keep doing it before we get dementia.
while we can still remember what we're talking about.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining me for today's seasoned conversation. Remember, every step we take shapes the legacy we leave. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone else navigating their own seasoned journey. To learn more and to become part of our growing community, visit us at theseasoncollective.com. Until next time, stay seasoned, stay purposeful, and remember, it's never too late to care deeply, to live boldly, and to rewrite your story.